Jehan Casey is the director of the First Nations Public Service Secretariat, and she's on the CWKN leadership team. Nice to have you with us. You and I share a background in physics. So one way to frame my first question is if there's anything that you can tell us about how you got from physics and astronomy to be involved in policy, and in well-being policy, and what is it that drew you to the language around well-being in particular as a framing for your work?
What moved me from physics to where I am now is because I wasn't very good at physics. You're right. I have a bachelor's degree in astronomy and physics, but I knew that I was not going to be sitting there with my postdoctoral candidates in either theoretical or experimental physics and make an immense contribution to that field. What I could do is bring some of that enthusiasm and the passion I also have for communicating to that field, because science, like policy, like government affairs, like so many things, I think like the concept of well-being is hard for so many people to grasp in practical terms and to understand as something that they can get excited about. And as a society, we're getting better at that with science, I think, but communicating that passion and that excitement to think that way was something I could contribute to. So I moved into communications and from there moved into fields that interest me and ended up working for the federal government and with First Nations organization after that in communications and now leading the FNPSS. As far as how FNPSS ended up or embraced the term of well-being in our work, is also, a really specific answer actually for us is we were, as an organization, asked by the First Nations Leadership Council here in BC, who had been provided some funding because of the poverty reduction strategy from the province of BC, to support poverty reduction in First Nation communities. And in doing the work to set up how that program could operate and how that would best be run, my team really quickly understood that poverty reduction is such a small sliver of what is needed and what First Nations wanted and how people defined what was trying to be achieved with poverty reduction, and ended up using the term well-being. So running that program as the Wellbeing Fund, which is still funded by the BC government and through the First Nations Leadership Council, we work with First Nation communities to fund projects to support well-being, their definition of well-being, or develop their plans and indicators of well-being in their community. And I don't even know if well-being is the right word, but it's certainly better than poverty reduction. Poverty reduction is important, but that holistic concept is important and where we're trying to strive to.
Super. Actually, my last question was just if you want to give us a bit of an introduction to what FNPSS does and talk about what you're up to at the moment.
The First Nations Public Service Secretariat is an organization that is mandated by First Nations leadership in BC to support literally the First Nations public service. So the individuals working in those 200 plus governments and First Nations, their administration, their public service, as well as the organizations and the institutions that also mandated by First Nations leadership support that system or their systems in as much as they want. We're a connecting group. We bring together any number of other groups that have expertise in writing constitutions, intergovernmental affairs, the First Nations Health Authority that works on well-being. And I'm not an expert in any of those things, and FNPSS as an organization is actually not an expert in any of those things. But we try to bring all those pieces together and try to help them to work holistically to holistically achieve well-being. So that talk about comprehensive, it could be so many aspects because a good government is comprehensive. Like I said, we are not the experts in almost anything. We work with partners, First Nation organizations in health, First Nation organizations in technology, First Nation government themselves, First Nations data organizations regionally and nationally. We strive for providing and ensuring, not necessarily providing, but ensuring adequate training, networking opportunities, tools, even opportunities to ensure that that discussion and that intergovernmental discussion happens with First Nations, that they can connect with each other, and build up those foundations of government that need to be put in place and rebuilt in nations, and also maintaining or building up that innovative excellence that all governments and First Nation governments want to achieve for their citizens, like being on the cutting edge of well-being and implementing well-being into governance. So there's a lot of how can we help kind of aspect to it, and a lot of looking at the different pieces of the puzzle that are already there and saying how can we bring these together to make them work better.